Pipe Box, your source for all things piping. My name is Jim McGillivray. If you find this video useful, please give it a like, and please subscribe to this YouTube channel to see more videos like this. You can print out the music that we're going to go over today by going back to the description of this video on my YouTube channel. There will be a link in that description. I'm going to do a competition tune with you today. The tune is Donald MacLean's Farewell to Oban. You've probably heard it, or at least heard of it. It was written in 1938 by Archie MacNeill, a blind piper and one of the foremost composers of the 20th century. The tune was written about wee Donald MacLean from Glasgow, who competed in Oban that year. Archie MacNeill thought Donald had played a stellar tune, but when the prizes came out at the end of the day, there was no prize for Donald. Archie remarked as they were leaving Oban at the end of the day that perhaps Donald might never want to come back to Oban at all, and that's where the tune got its title. I'm going to deal mostly with musical issues in this video. I'm going to assume that you can play all of the technique in this tune. We will talk about technique as it relates to music, but mostly we'll talk about music. I'm going to play each part as we go through the tune, and then at the end of the video I will play the entire tune for you. So let's start with the first part. That's the first part. Let's talk about a few things before we dissect that part. And I'm going to consult my notes here because the next 3 points that I make are extremely important, not just in this tune, but all 2/4 march playing. First is tempo. My recommendation is that the slowest you play this tune in competition is around 56 beats per minute. The fastest would be 68 to 70 beats per minute. Your optimum tempo will be somewhere in the middle, depending on your technical capabilities. Do not play faster than you're technically capable of playing. Do not let your tempo exceed your technical capabilities. Increase the tempo of your tune very gradually in small increments, even 1 or 2 beats per minute at a time. Second point is the offbeat. The offbeat is the beat in between the beats. In 2/4 marches, they are extremely important. When I play a tune to the metronome, a march to the metronome, I always double time the tempo. That is, if I'm trying to play a march at 60 beats per minute, I double that to 120 beats per minute, even though I'm still playing at the same tempo. This way I'm hearing both the beats and the offbeats. For example, the first part of Donald MacLean, just the beats, 60 beats per minute or thereabouts. Ho-be-dee, huckam-be, humpy-huddy, humpa-do, hee-up-a-dee-a-huddy, humpa-dee-a-da-dum-ba-da. If I double time that to same tempo and sing the tune, dum-be-ha, huckam-be, huck-a-duddy, humpa-do, hee-up-a-dee-ha-duddy, humpa-dee-a-da-dum-ba-da. Humpity, huckumpy, humpy daddy, humpa-do, dee, humpity, hatati, humpity, humpa-da. As you can hear, there is something happening, a note change or a doubling or a strike or something happens on almost every beat or offbeat. Your job as a musician is to put the correct notes on the correct beats and offbeats. The third point I want to make is about short notes. There are a lot of 30-second notes in marches, which are extremely short notes, but they aren't all played the same length. Those that are played on the beat or the offbeat get just a little bit more length than a simple short note that might just get you from one note to another. For example, let's look at the leaded notes and bar 1 of the first part of Donald MacLean. The first two leading notes are a low A, dotted 16th note, followed by a B, 32nd note. That B is extremely short. Now we go to bar 1, and we have a C, which is an 8th note, followed by another 32nd note on B. This is part of the movement we know as a tockum. And when you play a tockum in a march, you always make sure the short note is open and audible. So in the leading notes and first bar here, we have a very short 32nd note after the first low A. And then in the middle of bar 1, we have a tockum with a 32nd note that is very audible. So two different length short notes, and this kind of pattern continues throughout the whole tune. Let me play that first few notes for you. You can hear how the tockum is punched out and the C before the tockum is held. In bar 2, the very first note is a C, and again it is a 32nd note. So once again, we're going to punch that note out, particularly because it's not on an offbeat, it's actually on a beat. For those of you who haven't played tunes of this level of difficulty before, you may not have played many tunes where a short note is on a beat, but you're going to encounter this in competition tunes all the time. So the very first C in bar 2 is very well enunciated. And then the C 8th note before the high A at the end of bar 2 is the end of a phrase. So there's going to be the slightest pause, at least in your mind, you're going to think of that as having a little comma there before you go up to the high A. So the first phrase will sound something like this. That's the first phrase. Second phrase, which is bar 3, I want to bring your attention to the 5th note in bar 3, which is an E. Again, it's a 32nd note, and once again, it's a note that we want to make sure is enunciated really well. We also don't want to hit this short note early. It's a beat note, and hitting beat notes early is a cardinal sin. So let me play bar 3, and I want you to hear how well I enunciate that E in the middle of the bar. That little rising E 32nd note appears all the way through the tune. It appears in the middles of the parts, it appears at the ends of the parts, and it's really important to enunciate that note and not just make it a little flick of the finger. Bar 4, we have another tockum. Naturally, you're going to hold the E at the start of the bar, but you're not going to cut the two short notes in that little run down. Avoid. That's too clipped. Nice and open short notes, but a good long initial E. I hope you can hear how well enunciated the B is in the tockum, because it's happening on an offbeat. Dia-hackam bro. Really important not to hit it early, and it's important to enunciate the note. Do-ba-dee-dee-hackam bro. That's line 1. Bar 5 and bar 6 are identical to the bars above them. In bar 7, here again we have the short E that we just talked about that is well enunciated on the beat. Ba-dee-yum-ba-dee-dee-ha-dee. And then we come to the closing bar, a very common closing bar in 2/4 marches. I can't tell you how many 2/4 marches end in. One common error pipers make in these endings, well, 2 common errors. One is to make the C too long. The other is to make the C too short. These are played virtually dead even. Ba-dee-yum-ba-dee-da-da-dee-dum-ba-da-hum-bum. Ba-dee-yum-ba-dee-ba-da-dee-dum-ba-da-hum-bum. And that's the way you play those endings, not just in this march, but in pretty much any march. So I hope you've seen as we've gone through this part how the short notes can be treated a little bit differently. I haven't talked too much about the long notes. I find if you're listening and practicing a tune in double time and making sure that the short notes are well enunciated, the long notes tend to take care of themselves. But as a general rule, really push out 8th notes in this part and the rest. Let's move on to the second part. In the very first bar of the second part, the lead-in notes, bar 9, I want you to make sure that you hold that dotted C extremely long and make the D after it very, very short. That applies to all the lead-in bars throughout the whole tune. I find that pipers can sometimes get a little bit lazy about lead-in bars and round them out as they sort of anticipate the difficulties of the rest of the part coming. Don't forget your lead-in notes and give them lots of pointing. In bar 10, we will begin with a very long E 8th note. And then we will go all the way to the 4th note, which is one of our 32nd beat notes. A short C, which we're going to enunciate extremely well and make sure we play it on the beat, which is a right foot beat. So it's extremely important. Let me play the lead-in notes in bar 1 for you. I hope you can hear how I'm punching out that beat short C in the first bar. Bar 11 and the end of bar 10. Bar 10 ends with a dotted note followed by a 32nd note. That's another place where pipers can get, again, a little bit nonchalant about pointing and round those F, high G, high A runs out a little bit. I'm going to play the whole first phrase for you, and I want you to listen to the pointing of the dotted notes throughout. So watch those high A phrases don't become. At the end of bar 11, we have a very long high A. It's an 8th note followed by a dotted 16th, and they're tied together, followed by a 32nd F. That F 32nd note is going to be very short because the high A is going to be very long. How short you can make that F and how long you can make that high A will be largely determined by how skilled you are at playing an E doubling after a short note. When you hit the first E in bar 12, you're going to hold it. After that, bar 12 and bar 13 is pretty much the same as bar 3 and bar 4 in part 1, so we won't spend any more time on that. The first phrase of the second line is exactly the same as the first phrase in the first line. And the ending, even though the first note and the second note are a little bit different, the expression in the ending is the same as we did in the first part. Again, making sure you hold the E and making sure you play the last C and low A with the burl on it dead even. Let's move on to part 3. To me, the third part is the most difficult part of the tune. We have some bouncing up and down between top hand and bottom hand that can be technically quite tricky. In bar 1, the very first note is a 32nd note C. It's one of our tocums. And as we know, the tocum, the talk part of the tocum, is going to be very audible and it's going to be squarely on the beat. Remember, the short note of your tocum is always on the beat. That's why we call it a tocum. Now, in the rest of bar 19 and bar 20, we start to climb the scale with dotted 16th notes, and we bounce between the top and bottom hand in kind of a tricky fashion. That fingering is quite challenging, and pipers can get bogged down here and end up playing the expression of the tune here very round because they're having a little bit of trouble with the technique. So the challenge here is to keep pointing the long notes all the way through the first line and make sure your tocum, again, is on the beat. If you do the pointing right and you get the short notes nice and audible, once you phrase the tune correctly, you can really start to make the tune talk. And that's the goal here, to make the phrases and the sub-phrases and the bars talk to each other as you go through the tune. So that kind of pointing is really necessary in the first line of the third part. In the second line, the first phrase is the same. The ending is a little bit different. It ends with a high A grip in bar 25 rather than the E doubling and F doubling that we saw earlier. You're going to hold the high A 8th note a long time before you play the grip. And you're going to play a nice, open, bubbly grip that's accurate. There's a video on grips on this YouTube channel, and if you have trouble with grips, you might have a look at it. The two spots where we have grips in this tune are the third part, and of course in the middles of the parts all the way through. Some pipers have trouble with that low A to B grip, so that may also be something you need to work on outside of the tune. We see that in bar 22, right at the end of bar 22. That finishes the third part. Let's move on to the fourth. last part is quite a lovely part, and it has a very, very strong offbeat, which you'll hear as I clap double time and sing the part. You'll hear how all the offbeats are hitting the top notes, especially the high A's in the first phrase. Do ba dee a do a dee la a do a dee a da. Hear that again with me, just clapping the offbeat. Ho ba dee a do a dee la a da a dee a da. It's really important to hit those notes exactly on the offbeat, not early, and get as much power and intensity out of those notes as you can get. The rest of this part requires pointing of the dotted 16th notes all the way through and making sure that the 8th notes are held to their full value all the way through. So something like this. I'm exaggerating some of the pointing there to make a point, but I hope you can hear that pointing of every note is really crucial. If you lose your focus and let 2 or 3 round notes go by, you lose some of the effect of your music. The third phrase in the second line of the fourth part is pretty much the same as the first phrase, and the ending is the same as in the first part. That leaves us with the second ending, which is maybe the second trickiest phrase of the tune. It goes like this. Short notes again. Humby hutty, if we look at bar 37. Humba hutty, hutty, hida hutta, yaba hakam da. That's in bars 37 and 38. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 short notes that are happening on beats or off beats, and your tendency will probably be to rush those a little bit and play them a bit like this. Wait for the short notes. That's the second ending. That may take some extra work. The second ending is, as I say, technically quite tricky. One other bar I would like to direct you to is back to bar 30 in the last part. The very last 2 notes are a dotted low A followed by a 30-second C with a D grace note on it. I wanted to point this out because this is a pretty common place where pipers get crossing noises. If you don't get that D grace note perfectly accurate as you go up to the C, you will get a crossing noise in there. And that's something to be avoided, especially when that little pattern appears several times in the tune. That is the last part. So let's have a listen to the entire tune played on a Dager electronic chanter. closing, I wanted to say a few words about using a metronome to improve your march playing. I'm a big fan of singing tunes to the metronome. You can play tunes to the metronome, but that's an acquired skill. You have to work at it before you get comfortable playing with a metronome. You can sing to a metronome pretty easily. So I would take a 2/4 march like Donald MacLean's Farewell to Oban. I would figure what tempo I'm playing it at. Let's say it was 68 beats per minute, and I would double that and set the metronome so I was hearing the tune in double time, and then I would sing to it, something like this. Humpity huckumpy huppity humpadori uppaticka ducky dumpaticka duckambro humpity huckumpy huppity humpado he uppaticka ducky humpado dum-ba-dum. Doesn't matter whether you have a singing voice or not, you're singing or humming to yourself. The key is to sing and hum perfectly on the beat, so the next time you play, your musical mind takes control of your hands and helps those hands to play on the beat. That's about it for Donald MacLean's Farewell to Oban. That was a quick tour. There's lots more to be said about it, but hopefully this will give you an in to this tune should you decide to tackle it. From me, Jim McGillivray at the Pipe Box, good piping.